So greetings classicists and welcome to the third and last lesson before you depart for sort of Christmas holidays, because you've got another week's worth of work that'll be pretty intense, but after that, Christmas holidays. So let's get cracking with the Amazons once more. So what I'd like to do is on a piece of paper write down as many of the things about the Amazons that makes them barbaric from Herodotus as you can remember. Give yourself 3-4 minutes. Try and get as many of those ideas as possible. Stop the video and go for it. Good. Did you stop it? I'm not going to tell you the answers. Oh, okay, fine. So, oh no, it's one by one. Okay, anyway. So here are some of the many things that you could have got from that article that make them barbaric. So they're in control of marriage, not the way around. Should be the head of the household, not them. They don't have a household, really. They're in control of their sexuality, which is dangerous because women are passionate creatures, as evidenced by Helen of Troy, and these Amazons have multiple sexual partners. So even though they do get married, it's impossible to know who the father is, which means lineage and inheritance and kleos and society and citizenship is all thrown up into the air and impossible. So there's so much in that. They have no household skills. They can't weave, which means they can't make clothes for their husbands, which means they are not suitable women, and they can't cook and all of the things that fundamentally women are required to do. They break up households. Remember, they drag away those Scythian men to them, not the other way around. Women should be sent to another household. They don't have a city, so they don't have all of the things that goes with the city, the assembly, the polis, the people, the political body. None of those things happen for the Amazons. So there's a lot in that. Politics is crucial to being Greek. There's no real politics or law. That doesn't mean they're all bad, but they don't have that structured, ordered system of law and politics that defines you as a Greek. And different Greeks have slightly different laws and different systems, but they all have them nonetheless. They also use bows and horses, and those are key weapons of the Persians. So that makes them especially exotic and strange and dangerous. On top of that, obviously, the more simple point is they fight men and they win. When they first land in this land of the Scythians, they raid, they plunder, they kill Scythians. And finally, oh yes, no sailing. So remember, sailing and understanding of sailing and stuff is a great sign of technique, control of nature, sophistication. It means trade. It means all of these things. Do the Amazons even recognize Xenia and that kind of thing? Possibly not, if they don't really have a household to welcome you to. So they are, even though the description in Herodotus to us doesn't seem that dramatic, I mean, that is the absolute opposite of everything a Greek woman and almost in many ways a Greek man should be. So controversial. Right, what I would like to do now is have a look at the clip from Edith Hall, Invention of the Barbarian. Edith Hall is one of the principal scholars on barbarian and Greek identity, and she has written a brilliant book called Inventing the Barbarian Through Tragedy, and that's downloadable as a free PDF on her website. By all means, download it, have a look. It's got some great quotes, it's got some great ideas. It is not beyond you, but it is a large book focusing on Greek tragedy. Bits of it you probably wouldn't get at this point. I'm not going to say read the whole thing, but it's there, and I think plenty of you should certainly give it a go. Anyway, moving on. So jot down all of the ideas that Edith Hall has. Again, the academic arguments. Make sure you say the word Hall. Make sure you write down what it is that she says and thinks, especially with regard to what it means to be Greek. So stop this, watch it, and go. Good. So because it's so important and I'm so nice, I have put down a very short summary of one of her most important ideas, and there are many more that you should have picked up on. But anyway, this is what you absolutely must take from this video. What Edith Hall thinks it means to be Greek. And remember, different scholars have different ideas, but as one of the leading scholars, her idea is certainly worthy of consideration. So she argues that to be Greek, you have to have common descent. So that means common descent from heroes, as she said. So not necessarily from one person, not some kind of Greek Adam as in Adam and Eve, or not everyone is descended from Hercules, but you have common descent from a series of sort of well-known, well-respected heroes like Perseus, Theseus, Peleus, those kind of people. So this common descent from this small group of heroes. She says the most important thing is language. Yes, there are different dialects, but fundamentally you speak Greek and therefore you are Greek. It's an idea, and that probably explains why Homer is so important. Remember, we're dealing with a world where there is nothing like the wealth of material that exists in the world today in terms of videos and books and things. I mean, there's some stupid sort of statistic that if you tried to watch every cowboy film that had ever been produced from birth to death, aged 90 years old or something, you couldn't do it. There's so many cowboy films that have been produced, whereas in the ancient world, the number of books that have been produced is tiny, and certainly in the earlier part of still classical history, there are very few books, and people, it's quite a weird thing. You could know the names of all the books in existence in your language, and you, if as a very educated man, you could have read all the books that exist in your language, and you could speak to another educated man who has also read all of the books that exist in your language. So quite a difficult concept to get to grips with, and one of those books that everyone read, everyone knew, or rather one of those authors is Homer and the Odyssey and the Iliad. She also talks about religious festivals, so understanding and attending religious festivals like the Olympic Games, going through the proper social rituals make you Greek. And then also, very importantly, customs. So the customs xenia, as we talked about before, burial and respect for the dead, but also laws. Another thing I would add to this that Edith Hall doesn't is the role of women, but we'll come on to that later on. So hopefully you got that essential definition of Greekness. Now, it's your lucky day. It's another good overview, and this is Professor Aston, who is talking about the Persian Wars. Now, when you watch this, there are a couple of sort of things that she says about the author Herodotus that won't make much sense to you now, but he is a set text, big chunks of Herodotus, not the whole thing. And understanding some of the arguments she put forward about what motivates Herodotus to write are extremely important. So try and get those two. But what I really want you to get from this is a good overview, good understanding of key dates, key events, key individuals. Who were the Persians? When did they invade Greece? Why did they invade Greece? Just a brief chronology. I think from about 546, I think it would be, down to 479 BC. And again, just one thing to clarify, and some of you will think I'm being patronizing, but remember with BC, the numbers go down to 0. Sorry, touch of the COVID there. So, well, they don't go down to 0. There's no year 0, but so 490 BC is further away from us than 450 BC. So it counts down until it gets to the birth of Christ. Whether you believe in Christ or not, that is the point of reference. And then afterwards, it starts counting up AD, so 2000 AD, 2001 AD, etc. Right through to 2020 AD, where we are still just. If you're feeling especially, what's the word I'm trying to use politely? Tolerant? I don't know, whatever. I've lost interest. You can use BCE, which means before Christian era, because arguably BC, before Christ, kind of presupposes a belief in Christ and Christianity and all that goes with it. So feel absolutely free to use either. I use BC. I'm not particularly religious, but well, I'm not religious at all, actually, apart from maybe a bit of Zeus worship, if the mood takes me. But if you want to use BC, that is fine. If you want to use BCE, that is also fine. Knock yourself out. Anyway, back to Professor Aston's video. So have a watch, jot down key dates, key events, key individuals. Go. So just a couple of things that you must get to grips with. Now, we will do these later on. They will be a big part of the rest of the course, but if you have a very good outline understanding of them now. So many more things that we talk about make sense. So 546, Croesus, the Lydian king, is defeated by Cyrus. Now, just before that, Croesus had taken over the Ionian Greeks who lived on the coast of Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. And because he had taken over those Greek cities, they were then passed on to Cyrus when he conquered Croesus. Now, the Ionian Greeks, that's the name of those Greeks who occupy that coast of modern Turkey, were not very happy being part of the Persian Empire because the Persians didn't respect their freedom, they didn't understand their religion, they had all sorts of other differences, which is the nature of the course. But anyway, in the 490s, they revolted and they got help from Athens, but not Sparta. So even though this revolt was crushed by the Persians, by King Darius felt they needed to be punished further. So King Darius invaded mainland Greece, specifically Athens and Eretria, and he was surprisingly defeated by the Athenians at Marathon in 490 BC. Now, because of that great humiliation, his heir, Xerxes, invaded Greece again in 480 BC, and initially he defeated the Spartans at a battle called Thermopylae, although 300 Spartans inflicted horrific damage on his army in the rather famous film 300, and then he went on to burn Athens. Now, the Athenians were driven out of the city but not defeated, and they defeated Xerxes and his Persian army at a battle called Salamis, which is a naval battle, and then that meant Xerxes ran away, and the Persians didn't. The army remained there under one of his commanders, Mardonius, and in 479 Mardonius is defeated at Plataea, which is in the middle of Greece, and at the same time the Persians are defeated in Mycale, which is over in Turkey in Ionian Greece, and the Persian yoke is thrown off the Greek world. So the Greeks are traumatized by Persian invasion and destruction, and the Persians do terrible damage to the Ionian Greeks and the mainland Greeks, and it's a savage war both on the battlefield and off, but fundamentally the Greeks win, but they have a deep fear and mistrust of the Persians before, during, but especially after this. So this is a source that we will probably do later on, but it is one of the visual material sources, and this is by the Triptolemus painter, and it is it's called Greek versus Persian, and this was done in 460 BC, so after the war. So there's a lot of sort of prejudice. Well, prejudice is a bit of a loaded word. Is it prejudice? Possibly. Anyway, there's a lot of meaning to these images where we see this Greek fighting the Persian. So the Greek is the guy winning, the Persian is the guy losing. Now it's just interesting to notice what the Persian is wearing. So he's wearing trousers, which is an extremely effeminate thing to do. So no self-respecting Greek man would be seen wearing trousers. The ultimate sign of effeminacy. You remember that negative idea. If a man is behaving as a woman, he is being effeminate. The clothing has also got tons of patterning, which shows a kind of luxury, excess, focus on looks and appearance rather than practicality. There's an element of softness to the material. It's not hard, tough armor. There's no emphasis of musculature like you see on the Greek breastplates. Not only that, but he's wearing the soft hat, the kadaris, which is again a key kind of Persian stereotypical garment, much like the kind of French beret, perhaps, or an Australian hat with the kind of corks dangling down. The Persian is also defeated. He's in a sort of weaker position. He's been fighting the Greek. It's clearly not a kind of a walkover, but fundamentally the Persian has been beaten to his knees, and the Persian is armed. If you look, you can see with a bow and arrow, you can just see the quiver, which is where you store the arrows, kind of between the Persian's legs, although it's behind his leg, and then you can just see the ends of the bow being hidden by the Greek shield and the Persian's leg, but clearly there's a bow there. So the Persian has been using a bow, and that is a sign of Persia and the fact that the Persians like to fight from a distance, whereas the Greek is wearing all the kind of full hoplite equipment that again shows, at least at one point, he was fighting in formation with his comrades with discipline, bravery, order, and representing his polis. his city. So just an important little sort of depiction of a Persian to bear in mind, because we will see as we explore the visual materials how the Amazons go from being exotic and foreign in some ways, but it's not really clear that they're from a particular area, to being fundamentally Persian, almost in depiction. So a quick sort of way of thinking about these visual material pots. It works for a lot of the other visual material pots as well. In a sense, it works for all visual material, so it's a really good kind of framework, although, you know, you'll always need to be a little bit flexible on your feet. So what you need to be looking for when you see this visual material, so nudity. Are we seeing heroic nudity, or are we seeing nudity in a female, which hints at excessive sexuality? Perhaps a goddess, but there's no actual goddesses in the set visual material. Clothing, what does that say? Is it effeminate trousers? You know, is it patterned clothing and material that points at luxury? Is it very feminine clothing on a man? Is it feminine clothing on a woman? There's a lot to be drawn from all of the various things that they wear. Weapons and armor, well, obviously you've got the classic dynamic of the bow being a Persian weapon, and the hoplite shield, the hoplon, and the spear, the dory, and the Attic helmet, and the armor being very Greek. You know, slow, requires discipline, order, bravery, versus the bow, which is fast, light, you know, slightly cowardly, etc., etc. Now, a lot can be seen from body position and motion. Usually, the Greek defeating the Persian, and the Persian showing submission or defeat or fear by being, you know, kneeling, running, or dying. So fairly standard stuff. And also, there's a lot of context that covers a huge amount. So context, you know, for example, a woman on the battlefield. Well, that in itself speaks volumes to what's going on in terms of barbarity or difference between Greeks and barbarians. You'll also need to understand what's being depicted in a pot. So if a pot is depicting Achilles, there'll be certain things about Achilles that you'll need to understand. And if a pot is depicting Hercules or Heracles, again, you know, different situations, and there's a different message, perhaps in some ways, being sent. So write those down. That's your it's a very good framework of analysis. So what I'd like you to do now is I'll attach a handout to the assignment, and I'd like you to kind of reverse engineer the exemplar I gave you. So basically do it the other way around. So label the image of Achilles and Penthesilea with all of the little things that were picked out in the exemplar. So, you know, draw a little line to her axe and say, well, you know, this is a battle axe, possibly invented by Penthesilea, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've got this, I don't know why I'm pointing. You've got the Scythian shield, which is that curved shield on Penthesilea. You know, draw a line to that. Don't just label it with shield, label it with Scythian shield, and then maybe a bullet point of, you know, foreign or exotic or something like that. You know, you could more or less rewrite, you know, just chop the exemplar up and stick it where it's supposed to be. This is just a way for you to learn the significance of this source. So stop the video, DVD, not DVD, obviously. Anyway, stop the clip and have a crack at that. Give yourself as long as you need. I think in class people did it in 10 minutes or so, under 10 minutes. But do it properly. Very good. Well done. So on to this one, which we didn't actually get onto in class. So we'll skip through and do what we did, which was this one. Now this one is quite an interesting one, because this is Heracles and the Amazons. And this was created by the Euphronius painter in 550 to 500 BC. So do add to these who painted them and when they're painted, because that's potentially quite significant. It's also little questions that could be asked. So have a look at this scene and label it, you know, as much as you can. To what extent does this show the difference between the Greeks and the barbarians? And this is an interesting one, because in many ways it doesn't actually show that much difference. Now, stop this, have a go for as much time as you need, 10 minutes or so, you know, thinking about all the things that we've talked about before. So stop and have a go. So I think it's interesting if you go down the list and you look at nudity, we'll see the sort of central figure is Heracles. So even though he's nude, even though he is nude, and that is heroic nudity. Interestingly, there's a man on the left, as you can see it, I would imagine, who is also joining Heracles in fighting the Amazons. So this could be a simple Athenian. This could be, it could even be Theseus, because this is the myth of the Attic War when the Amazons invade Athens, and Heracles and Theseus fight them off, possibly invading to reclaim Hippolyta, possibly invading because Hippolyta was rejected. There's all sorts of different variations of the myth, and this is why you need to have this contextual understanding. So we can see all sorts of things here in terms of differences, and Greeks and barbarians. I mean, first of all, you've got all of those things. You've got women on the battlefield, women fighting against great heroes. So the fact that it takes Hercules and maybe Theseus to bring these women down shows just how dangerous they are. Now, interestingly, in terms of arms and armor and weaponry, actually the Amazons, a lot of them are using very Greek weapons, which is quite strange. The Amazon one of the Amazons on the floor is completely dressed as a hoplite. She's even got a hoplite shield with some kind of with a picture of a cup on, which would be a family crest or tribal crest or something along those lines. So she is absolutely dressed as an Athenian would be. In fact, the only reason we know she's an Amazon is because she doesn't have a beard, and she's been fighting with those on the side of those other Amazons in what probably looks like a kind of hoplite line. So the difference isn't necessarily that big here. The Amazons have got a picture. You can just see the picture of Medusa on the shield, which is a common design for Athenian shields. They've got spears, and they're fighting, more or less as a phalanx. They've got the they've got everything. It's just the fact that they're women that's a bit strange for those Amazons. But we are starting to perhaps see the transformation of Amazons into really exotic and foreign barbarians. If you look to the far right, you'll see an Amazon. She's got the Attic helmet on, but she's wearing a kind of onesie, an exotically patterned onesie, and she's got a bow. And that is very, very Persian. They used to wear these sort of jumpsuits, if you like, heavily decorated and patterned, and they used to fight with bow and arrow, as well as other things. But that was a big sort of way in which they fought. And we can see this Amazon. There's a sort of certain sneakiness to her pose. She's hanging back from the main battle line, like a sort of a slightly sneaky, dishonest individual firing their bow at this great hero who's fighting face to face. So it's quite interesting, this pop, because there's a double representation of Amazons. Some seem to be absolutely straightforward and almost Greek, and others seem to be foreign but Persian, not just sort of unknown foreigners. Then if we look on the other side, you'll see another Amazon, dressed as an archer, dressed as very much as a Persian archer, and she's even wearing the Kidaris hat. So we see, again, apart from the lack of beard, she could well be a Persian man. And I think the interesting thing about this is that it's probably painted between 550 and 500, and that's when there's beginnings of tension, real tension between the Greeks and the Persians, and of course that breaks out into outright revolt and war and brutality and bloodshed in about 494 BC from memory. So this is probably reflecting that kind of increase in tensions, but the Amazons haven't yet become completely identified with Persians and that area of the East. So there's all sorts of other things that you can draw from this in terms of position, clothing, kind of rehash a lot of the old arguments, but draw and label as effectively as you possibly can. Anyway, that is about as far as we got in class. So all of that together should take you about an hour and a half. However, a couple of questions it would be good for you to look at and look at the pictures. You might need to kind of move the video off and on again, but if you just have jot down some ideas. Can we see a development or change in the depictions of the Amazons over time? So we've looked at it in reverse order. The first one we saw with Achilles and Penthesilea was the latest one, and then going back to the Euphronius painter one, and then have a think about what might have caused it. Well, I just told you the answer again and again, but jot down a few sentences. Good. So if you want to, I'll put up the link to a Quizlet that might, just for revision, you can have a bit of a go at it. It's reminding you of the stories of Achilles and Penthesilea and a few other sort of general ideas about the course. I'll put the link up. We might do it again in class. We might not, but if you fancy a play, if you fancy a bit of revision, then go for it. So anyway, that is that. There will be, of course, more online lessons next week, but congratulations, you have finished a term at Basvik. Hurrah!